Hello and welcome to the next installment of the Unwinding Podcast. I'm your host this week, Blake, one of the co-founders of More Than Wound. And always, I'm joined by fellow co-founder of More Than Wound, co-host of the show, Watch Genius Extraordinaire, Zach Weiss. How are you doing?
I'm good. Watch Genius. Genius, I don't know. Watch Guy. Watch,
Okay.
I don't know. Genius is just that's a really high mark.
Okay.
Watch Pusher.
Watch Pusher.
Watch Peddler. Yeah.
You have the trench coat with the watches inside.
Yeah.
And for those who are maybe listening to this for the first time, this is the Unwinding Podcast. I don't know if we have a real good, clean, concise description of what this is, other than it's me and Zach recording a podcast where we talk about what we want and probably complain a bunch. But I think the intention is that it's sort of a behind-the-scenes look at the industry, us kind of reflecting on our years of running More Than Wound, and hopefully you find that interesting. But today, we have a very special episode. Our guest today is Matt Smith-Johnson, who is watch designer extraordinaire, I think is a fair title to give you.
I do watch design. I'm a design. I always say I'm a design junkie. I like and watches are one of the things I get to design, and my favorite thing to design.
So for those of you who are not familiar with Matt and his work, he's designed watches for a number of different brands over the years. We can get into some of what those brands are in a little bit, but I'm sure you've seen those watches either on the pages of More Than Wound or at a Windup Watch Fair. So I want to dig in. As you guys know, Zach also designs watches for More Than Wound, our limited edition collaboration. So, I want to just kind of dig in and have a conversation about watch design, sort of drawing on both of your collective experiences designing watches. Because I think you guys both have unique approaches and obviously have been designing watches in sort of different ways. Zach for our brand, Matt sort of for many brands. And then there's a special project that Matt and I are working on currently. We have put together a team for the 2025 Ride to Conquer Cancer, which is a charitable bike ride put on by the Princess Margaret Cancer Research Center in Toronto. Again, we can get into this a little bit more, but this is Matt's 10th year doing the ride, which is really incredible. So we decided to put together a team of folks, which we'll sort of get into a little bit later, get some sponsors, and try to raise some money for cancer research, which we're really excited about. But before we dig into the questions about watch design, let's do a quick wrist check. Matt, you're the guest. What do you have on your wrist today?
Today I am wearing Tudor Black Bay Red. It's the first edition. I got this shortly after in 2013. I quit my job, being a creative director for an agency, and just decided to go it my own. And my first born was born shortly thereafter, and then I got so I guess that would be 2014. Sorry. She was born in 2014. I got this shortly after my daughter was born. So it's like my dad watch, really. It's pretty scuffed up. It's, it's a very sentimental piece for me.
Nice. Yeah. That's one of the smiling dials?
Yes, it's got the type at the bottom. And it's funny, like when I first saw this piece and they re-released it, I was like, I'm not a Rolex guy, really. And I saw that they were doing this and I was like, oh, those are pretty cool. And we just happened to be walking by a boutique and killing time for some reason. I was like, well, I'm going to go look at watches. And I was talking to somebody and I was like, let me see that. And I was like, I'm not really a big fan of these. They don't really suit me. And da-da-da. And I was like, but they're pretty cool. It's a nice, read. And I strapped one on and I went, oh. And it just sits, like the way it fits on my wrist also is just like completely perfect. So I was like, well. And then the other person was like, that looks really good. And I was like, yeah, it does, doesn't it? So like it won me over. I went from like, I don't know if I'm interested to, thinking about purchasing it. And I did have to save up for a bit because, quitting the job and all that. But after landing the first few, contracts on my own and, feeling financially secure enough, I decided to do this to kind of signify a big shift in my life and entering into fatherhood and going into business on my own, which has led me to where I am today. So, lots of feels associated with it.
So that's a solid amount of emotional imbuement into a single watch. You should keep that one. Definitely.
Yeah. It's a keeper. It is a keeper. I honestly, like, I I've been asked before, like if you had to get rid of everything and only keep one, what would it be? And it would be this one I keep for that reason. So
that's cool.
Yeah. That's so interesting, because I also feel like, Matt, knowing you and your like kind of style and also the kind of watches you design, like that's probably one of the more subdued watches.
This is not like
it's
what
like
I'm.
It's not a Matt watch in my mind, but it's funny that it's the most meaningful to you.
Yeah, and that's again, it's I own it. I've worn it for ages, and I still am kind of perplexed by the idea that I have. Like it's I'm like it's for somehow this hacked my brain, and I ended up walking out of a boutique at some point with a tutor. The one I actually like looking at with my eyeballs, and I'm like, ooh, that's more interesting, was the North Flag when that came out, because it was different, and I was like, ooh, that's so cool, and I wanted one of those. I wasn't thinking about this, but that's where I ended up anyways. So yeah,
that's cool.
What do you got on?
Yeah, Zach, you're up next.
Sure. So I grabbed something that I did work on. I will admit, though, I was wearing a different watch moments before that. I'm at home, so I have access. And this is the Boulder, one of the two Boulder X worn and wound. We called it the 3XT GMTs from last year or the year before. I honestly don't remember when we launched it at this point. But yeah, it's a cool one. I was actually just taking some photos of it for fun the other day. It was nice to kind of be put in front of it. It's very photogenic. Like the colors just worked out really well. Boulder makes a really nice watch for the price, and their printing is like exceptionally good. I feel like, for not that other watches don't have good printing, but there was a lot of different colors on this one. So, getting it all sharp was really important.
Yeah, that I feel like the team work on a lot more projects these days than in the early days of Worn and Wound, and sometimes these projects kind of like fly under the radar for me personally, as like I'm just not as involved all the time, and that's one of them. Like those came and went, or at least they were released, and I didn't really think too much about them at the time, I think. But every time I see one, I think we still have some of them. I'm just like, oh yeah, that's a great watch, and I keep meaning to like pick one up.
Yeah, they're cool. I noticed the printing in some of the we call it macro shots, the details where it's got the nice surface tension even of. I always look for that when you can see where the edges are nice and crisp and it's like a bubble of water on the surface a little bit. That I don't know if everyone else is looking for that, but
that's what designers. Yeah, no, we'll save that for later, I guess.
Yeah,
but yes, I agree.
We have two of those people here. So I'm wearing the Prevail. Sorry, remind me of the name of this watch, Matt, because you designed it, so you should.
Have that. Yeah, you are wearing the Prevail Onward Explorer, which we are also calling like the genre. It's the future field watch genre.
Yeah, I picked this up at Windup, and I have it on a spring-made nylon strap, and you were saying before we got started recording that like you have it on the same configuration. I think the reason I have it this way is because I bought it at Windup. I liked the way you were wearing it, and then I just bought the same strap. But it's funny, this watch, I haven't had this watch for a little while because we started carrying Prevail in the shop, and we also carry Springmade in the shop. And I think that this specific colorway had sold out, and we still wanted people to be able to see it. So it's been up in the showroom for the past couple months, but I just recently stole it back, and like, yeah, it's such a great like feeling watch, considering the case. Like, I think it's one of those watches you have to see in person, because you kind of see it with that sort of like larger, chunkier case, and it's easy to think maybe it won't fit or sort of wear as like, seamlessly as it does, but it's really not an uncomfortable watch to wear. It feels really nice on the wrist. It doesn't like wear very big. I love this watch. It's super cool. Great job on the design, Matt.
Well, thank you. Just quick note on the strap. That was in New York. You got that strap?
Yeah.
That's where I got my strap in New York too. And I was influenced by Kyle because he had it on that strap. And they were a few booths down. Yeah. So I was like, oh, I want mine on that strap. So then I went and got it. And now you have one. So
yeah, that's how it goes. Watchception, that's just what happens at these shows. So I thought it'd be cool to have a conversation about, your guys' experiences as being, designers in the watch industry. And we'll start kind of general, and then I have some sort of specific questions for both of you. But I guess I'll start with Matt, because I think, Zach, maybe you've talked a little bit about this, but also like definitely, retell your story. But Matt, like, how did you get into design in general, but I think more specifically, like, how did you first get into watch design?
So, do you want me to do design in general first and then watch design
Sure.
in that order? Sure.
Yeah.
So, design in general is, and actually, this is something that another thing that Zach and I have in common. The fact that I'm a designer at all is due to my love of heavy metal music. That is the thing that, I do mean this, but I feel like the moment I came online as a fully formed individual in this world was the moment in grade school I heard Master of Puppets on some other kid's Walkman. There was this kid that used to come and like do talent shows, and he would like play a solo on an electric guitar, and I was like, this kid is the coolest. And he was listening to stuff, leaned against a door out in the player. And he's much older than me. I was like, maybe grade like 3 or something. And I was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Can I hear that? Can I hear that? And eventually he just, and he gave me his headphones, and it was Master of Puppets. And it like just all the lights turned on. And I was like, what is this? And so what happens was, I love heavy metal music. My mother, actually my grandmother or my mother would take me to, there was like a tape shop, and every once in a while, and I could get a tape, but money was tight. So a lot of my cassettes were like bootleg. My cousin recorded a bunch for me from his records and whatnot, like just a bunch of bootleg tapes. And so, or I'd buy compilations because they were cheaper. So, I'd hear like, Judas Priest Painkiller on a bootleg, and I had no idea what the artwork looked like, so I would draw my own version of it. But then I started to see like Metallica t-shirts, and they had Puss. Pusshead was the artist who did a lot of their stuff. He also was an illustrator for Thrasher magazine, and can't remember the guy who designed Vic Rattlehead right now. Is it Ed? The last name is escaping me at present, but. Anyways, Ed Kemp? No, Ed Repka. Thank you. Ed Repka was another illustrator, and I really loved their work. Anyways, I would just sit there. I didn't have a lot of friends. I had a mullet, and I just hung out by myself, and I listened to heavy metal, and I filled my sketchbook with like Thick Rattlehead, and I was trying to learn how to, draw skulls like Pusshead and invent, sometimes I'd hear like a song by Testament and be like, make my own album art or my own logo for them, because I had no real idea what the official thing looked like. And then one day I went to, it was probably in like the 4th grade, I went to my teacher and said, hey, I love drawing like album art and things for like metal music. And I know this is a job that exists in the world because I can see there's album covers. What do you have to do to get to do that? And pre-Google, obviously, this teacher was like, let me figure it out and I'll get back to you. And then like maybe like a week or 2 later, she saw me, pulled me aside and said, you'd have to be a graphic designer to do that job. And that was it. From there on forward, I wanted to be a graphic designer. And somewhere there's I have this photocopied yearbook we used to make in grade school. And the year prior to this discovery, it says, what do you want to be when you grow up? And, little photocopied picture of mullet me says, I want to be a Ninja Turtle, because I was living in Fantasyland. And then the next year it says, what do you want to be when you grow up? And every subsequent year says, I want to be a graphic designer, because that was it. And so, I went through the motions, took the courses I needed to in high school to get there, found a couple colleges that I was interested in. I ended up going to college. It was one of the best experiences I've had. I really enjoyed my years learning design. It was I had amazing teachers, and I felt like, I'm around the things that I really enjoy truly. And when I started working even professionally as a designer, I'd be like, the first studio job I had, I remember I would go in on the weekends voluntarily. And at the time too, the first like real studio job I had, one of the clients was EMI. So I was certainly getting to do album art. And, I even have this nice memory of listening to, Devin Townsend Zach, Devin Townsend from Strapping Young Lad.
Oh, I know Strapping Young
Lad.
Yeah,
Strapping Young. Yeah. He made this heavy metal, like kind of rock opera album called Ziltoid the Omniscient. And I used to go in on weekends and listen to that album specifically and just work on what I was working on. Anyways. So that's what got me into that. And I've always loved watches, and I don't really know why. Like the idea that they were always important to me and that I wanted one was just predates memory of any reason why that would be. And I just always wanted to do it. And, as I said, I worked in studios and agencies over the years, and I've done a lot of side projects too. Like I made a clothing brand with my stepbrother that we had for a number of years until about 2008 when the market kind of tumbled in on itself. And I used to make my own band's merch when I was doing that. And I found that even when I was like being in a band and like trying to be like, yeah, we're going to be rock stars, like the thing that really interested me was like, oh, I get to make the t-shirts now. Oh, I get to make the album art. Like that was the part that had the most appeal. And, anyways, all that I go through. And eventually I just realized that the studio world is not really for me, and I'm not really getting to do the things I want. I'm working on, even for clients and products and companies that I'm actually like, I don't agree with this, but like, I got to do it, or, they'll just say, see you later. And it just got to a point where, I was in a nice cushy position in a larger agency, and I just didn't feel good about doing it. Like I felt bad about what I was making, and I just thought this is just soul crushing. And then, my kid was, my now ex-wife was like, oh, we're gonna have a baby on the way. But she did come to me and said like, look, now's your time. If you don't make a change in your life about this today, this is going to be stuck. You'll be stuck doing this forever. So I did a moonlighting gig and quit my job, and then just took a few years to really get up the courage to do watches. But I actually was after losing a client that I had here in Canada that was like a big company. I won't get into the specifics of that, but I did everything right and made this company a lot of money. And then they called me to their headquarters that they, just redecorated and everything because everything was going great. And they had given me a lot of work, and I'm like, I'm set for years now, and I have an employee that I've hired at this point. And they're like, yeah. So the investors that we've got are like, hey, who's Matt from Scarborough? We need a real agency to do this from here on out, even though I got them to that level. And I just had the wind knocked out of me. And I was like, oh my God, like I was devastated. So I thought I did everything right. I've done everything everyone's asked of me. I got here, and then someone can just go whip. And then the thing that I did, which is where I met both of you guys, was I was like, well, there's a windup happening in, New York. And, I don't know, like I've got some money in the bank from jobs I've done. I'm going to buy a ticket and just go to Windup and see what this, like, I finally gave myself permission. This thing blowing up in my face was like, well, now I have nothing that I'm going to lose. I had so many eggs in that basket, and I was building this like studio around it. And and then I went to Windup. I met you guys. I met a bunch of other companies, and then someone said, hey, can you do like a dial for me? And I got a couple little bits and bobs of design work out of that, and then the rest just kind of, it just started to snowball and grow from there. And, that was, I was doing work for another outlet. I rebranded, I was still doing work at agencies. Even I did the rebrand of Blog to Watch back in, ages ago. Like this was 2011 maybe, so a long time ago. So I had some connection with the watch space. I used to make straps and stuff, but even making straps, I was just thinking, how can I get into this space? So, just snowball effect, one thing leads to another, and just keep pushing. And I still feel like I'm just through the door though, So
you at this point, and I'm sure we don't need to go through the whole list, but I mean, you've designed watches for Laco, you've designed watches and continue to design watches for Vero, obviously Prevail. I don't know if there are other watch brands you've designed for that you can share, but I mean, you've sort of designed across a pretty wide spectrum at this point. Is most of your career at this point focused exclusively on watch design?
As of today, I think most of the work I'm doing now is the watches themselves. I'm still doing other things. Like I redid the typography for Ulsta for their logo. That was a very technical assignment. I don't know if they're printing that logo on their dials, but I know I've seen it on banners and things. So that's just like maybe their marketing version of it. But, I still do those kind of, bits of typography, logos, and things here and there. I did some illustration for you guys for the Windup merch, and I've done some for someone else who's going to use it for something, or another illustration that came out of that. So packaging, bits and bobs and stuff connected to it, but much more, it's usually centered around, ideally I like to design end to end if someone's going to hire me to design a project. So like, an example of this that people maybe have seen is the Smoky project, where it's like Vero had me come in. They're like, hey, we need to do, the Smoky Bear piece. So, I get the brief. Before even the watch with that one, I identified a problem, which was recreating Smoky for a watch dial appropriately. Just using the standard bear wasn't going to cut it because it doesn't reproduce really nice and crisp when it's really small. So the first part of that job was very much a graphic design thing where I made my own like visage of Smoky, the only you face, with a little bit of sternness in it, but not too much. And, after I came up with that and we were like, that looks good. That's the Smoky logo for this going forward. That'll be what we use as the badge. Then it was into, watch concepts. So we tried a bunch of different things, but the brief that we kind of came up on was, it's got to be traditional, but it's got to be a watch that, like, if you were a member of the Smoky fan club, like Smoky would, if he was real, he would wear this watch. And then when you joined him in his fight for, protecting, the wildlands and forests of North America, he would hand you one of those watches. So it was based on that. And, it is a field watch, but we try to add little details that are like, well, I haven't seen this. I haven't seen a double, kind of like rounded stepped, bezel with the polish and the finishings. I always try to do something that makes it a little different in there, and hit some little details in the design. And then after that, do the packaging and the manual and all that, because that's part of that story. And so I was able to work, I got actually access to the Smoky archive, the official archive of all of their assets, which was just like a treasure trove. Like I totally just looked through it for ages because I was like, oh my God. And then I got to take some of these like, famous paintings of him and, add in Photoshop the watch on him and paint it on myself and turn it into a package. And then once that's all done, then I get some, and I ended up taking some of the photos for that. I believe the like close-up macros and some of the flat lays for that campaign I got to shoot. But yeah, just like a nice end-to-end, thing. It's for one, it helps. We can tell the story over a larger kind of canvas, like I feel like there's a lot of touch points and opportunities to tell a story. And if you try to cram them all into the watch, it gets a little busy. And I'm guilty of doing that early on. Some of the earlier projects, maybe I crammed a lot into like one space because I was like, this is the only opportunity I have. Spreading it out is very nice. But then also it's just from a personal level, when I get to do those things, I get to play in all my little different sandboxes. I get to do a little bit of everything.
No, that's really interesting because obviously, Zach, you designed a number of watches for us, but I think you probably say between like watch editor and watch designer, like you've done a lot more watch editing and reviewing and, consuming of watch content and that kind of a thing, maybe comparatively. So I'm curious, like kind of thinking about how Matt took his graphic design background and applied it to watches, like what, how do you think your background as a designer, a product designer, graphic designer has affected the way that you kind of look at watches and review watches? Do you think it provides to you like a different angle of thought as maybe compared to some other journalists, or just how has that affected your approach?
Yeah. I mean, I would hope it has affected it, and that, the skill that, there's an inherent skill that you have to have getting into design. I think to be successful at it in any, way, shape or form, and like, whether some subjectivity there, I guess, whether or not you are or who is, but, my background, I was in arts before design, and it was sort of I have to turn this into some sort of paying job. I'm not going to roll the dice and try and be a painter. Though maybe I should have, I don't know. And, ended up in product design, really starting with an interest in, architecture, and then through doing product design, end up in packaging design. So then I ended up doing both sort of graphic and product design together, which is packaging, for a little while before leaving and just going on to Worn and Wound. But, I at the time when we were looking at reviews and things back in the early days, I just remember feeling like there was a real lack of like constructive criticism in the way sort of you might receive it in an arts education environment, and I mean sort of a lack of knowledge of kind of what they were talking about in some respect. There were like people using sort of rules that felt really obvious, like, oh, a hand should go here or this should go that, but they had no idea about layout. They had no idea about typography. They had no idea about the colors. They had no idea about, taking a step back and just seeing everything all at once. It's like not everything has to abide by rules at all, and it can still be very successful. I think, Matt, your designs are a good example of that. I mean, the Prevail watch that Blake is wearing is a very avant-garde design that like broke rules, right? So like to get where it's going. And I just feel like I maybe just had the tools to analyze that. And like I said, the ability to articulate those ideas and critiques into phrasing that is constructive. We don't believe in just slamming stuff. A review saying that is ugly is of no value to anyone, but being able to say why. So yeah, I mean, I that was at least that gave me the I'd say the wind in my sails to do it. In the early days. Yeah, does that answer? I think.
Yeah, I was going to say also, Zach, sorry to interrupt, but I one thing, I don't know if I've ever told you, but like the colors that you use on the combinations, like they're different combinations, but the way you use color stands out to me. Like
thank you, I appreciate
consider that to be like a very like, oh, that's a Zach thing. And actually we had kind of a crossover with the Workhorse.
Yeah.
And that very wild colorway that it came out in. And but just like, the way you use color, it's when I see your stuff too, because I love color, but when I see your stuff, I'm like, I would never have thought to use it in that way. Like just my perspective is different. And that's the fun part of watches and watch design to me, which I agree with you. I still feel like there could be more design centered discussion around it. Like what really bores me is prestige and, like well, this comes from so-and-so and it's got this provenance and these are the words that just get thrown around and mean nothing after a while. But I feel like,
I think if come from a design background, you're buying the product for the product, and like the brand name often doesn't mean very much, and it's hard. I mean, given my position and like everything to fully kind of go that route, sometimes both for the positive and negative. Sometimes I'm angry at a brand for whatever reason, and then I really like a watch they came out with, and then I feel very conflicted, but it's always the product that wins. It's funny. I don't know, like, I feel like I should probably show people my paintings at some point, because if you saw my paintings, I think my color stuff would make a lot more sense, because I was an abstract painter. Very bright
This is
colors.
what I was going to say is I want to see that, because when you said you're a painter, I was like, oh, then the other thing that came into my brain was like, yeah, they are kind of like in a painterly way, the color palettes you use. Like, I think, yeah, I would be interested to see your paintings. Like, I really would. I like color, but I think when I was being taught color too, like it was always very like not monochromatic, but trying to keep things with like in a certain hue. And even when I was in design school, I had this one teacher who was always like, try to use 2 colors to do something.
Yeah.
Like do a whole book in 2 colors. How can you use those colors? Like he really pushed me to just think like on these like really stripped down, very connected color palettes, which to me, like I sometimes go like, oh, I feel like this is predictable, but it's because it's my brain and I see how it works inside. Whereas I think again, when I see yours, I'm like surprised. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I'm like, I wouldn't think to do that. 1 and 2, like who else is doing that? That's like, like I don't look at like Paul Lynn and think, oh, they do color. No, they use color, but it's a different way of using color. So
I'm glad that you feel that way. That's reassuring that people from a design background see it that way. I think, it's funny also, ironically, like I'm at home right now, and I feel like my clothes kind of show that, because I'm just wearing my comfy clothes at my desk at home. But like, I think I typically wear dark colors, and actually my watches are a little bit too colorful for my aesthetic. You know what I mean? Like I prefer to wear something pretty stripped down and minimal, but expression is colorful. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. That's cool. Yeah. I wear a lot of black, and I think sometimes for me, like the pop of color is my sneakers and my watch. So I'll try to like match those 2 things or whatever. And actually often I choose my watch in the morning and then pick the clothes to go with, which is not a normal human way of doing things, but
It's interesting with the cut, with the way, like in terms of talking about how you dress, because I just think, honestly, it makes me think about my mother, who's an artist, and my whole life she's always just worn black. It was almost like a joke growing up. It's like we grew up in this kind of like small traditional town, and it's like she stood out as like this crazy lady who just wore black all the time. But it's like I almost feel like that might be just like a trend among creative people, where it's, I don't know, it's like your default is so simple. You know what I mean? And like, so
I mean, do you remember in college people called me Zach and Black?
yeah,
For a
yeah,
while, you know,
That's pretty cool.
literally, I think I bought brown pants after I graduated. I was edgy.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
Yeah.
I think there might be, you know, so when I was working in agencies, I used to wear suits, and I love suits. I would have, and like, you know, you've got ties, you got blazers. I always pretty much wore jeans, so maybe not suit, but you know, I get the shirt tucked in, and I like color, and you know, the tie to the pochette, to the shoelaces, to the shoes, the type of leather, match the belt, blah 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 blah. All the textures and different things. Like, I loved dressing like that. It limited my ability to dress casually in it. And it was kind of funny when I was used to do that, and I'd go out with friends on the weekend. They're like, "You're still in a shirt and tie." I'm like, "It's all I have." I don't have I'm not making enough money to have two completely different wardrobes. I had some metal shirts and things tucked away for concerts, but for the most part, I was just like, "No, I don't like, I wear suits now. That's what I've got in my wardrobe." But the thing that I found then, though, was I used to get up really early in the morning to get ready, because it was like, oh, I got to get this and the socks and I think if you're creatively minded, like, it was fun for a while, but I remember there being days where I'm like, I'm actually stressed out by the fact that, like, I can't match this to this in a way that would be pleasing to me on how I feel this day. And so I've even had the thought, because I have many professors that wore all black, that maybe, you know, there is that caricature kind of the artiste in black turtleneck and all this. And I think maybe there's so much going on in our brains in terms of colors and things that exercise is, for most people, too upsetting. And it's just easier to be like, you know, black t-shirt, black sweater, black pants, black shoes, black hat, done. Like, if everything's black, I don't enter that corridor in the morning. And again, I think so at the time, like, now the idea of me having to get dressed like that in the morning would stress me out. But back then, as I said, I wasn't satisfied with work. I didn't feel good about a lot of the things I was doing. So I think, you know, putting on a fancy outfit and like a pink blazer with a blue pocket square and matching watch and blah, blah, blah was like, oh, that's the part I get to show. I'm still, the creativity is still alive in me. It hasn't been completely snuffed out by, you know, corporate cynicism. But anyways.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think you articulated what I was trying to communicate much better than I could, Matt. And it's funny, you know, the properness of your previous attire, because on the screen, we're doing this over like a video audio chat thing. I can see your hat says death and your shirt says destroy. So
yeah,
definitely in a different direction. And just sort of circling back to what you were saying about, or just like that idea of like, you know, bringing sort of a knowledge of design, graphic design, and, you know, like color theory and all the things you guys have been talking about to watch journalism. I think that, you know, everybody has their different experiences and brings that to their writing. And so I'm not trying to suggest at all that, like, you know, all people who talk about and communicate about watches need to be like experts in design. But I think, to your point, Zach, if you're going to start like putting rules around things or making declarative statements about the right and the wrong way to do things, which you probably shouldn't be doing in the first place. But I think that, like, you have to concede that, like, some appreciation, if not like real serious knowledge about the principles of graphic design, needs to be a part of your it needs to be in your quiver. It's not really fair to be sort of like making these declarative statements or judgments without really having that level of knowledge, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think at least to some extent, because if you can't articulate like why a dial feels balanced, let's just say, then like you don't know how to say it, right? You can't tell it to somebody else like why exactly that is, or the opposite, or out of whack. And like, you know, then at the end of the day, though, taste plays a role in whoever's looking at everything, so they can just completely disagree with you. Do things resonate with people differently? But yeah, I mean, and I feel like a lot of people just will gloss over that, and then I think you've seen this too, Blake, but like sometimes people call like a press release a review. You know what I mean? Because
Mm-hmm.
nobody knows what a review is, and sometimes reviews are just lists of product of like what's in a watch, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I could rant about that for probably a little too long.
Yeah. I mean, I think pretty early on working with Zach, like I learned that just saying a dial is clean is basically meaningless. Like it's not really like a valid, what do you call it? Observation of something. Like, yeah, it's interesting. So I think, yeah, I definitely think that over the years I've developed a real appreciation for like probably what I don't know and what I don't have, expertise in, and I think I see that maybe sometimes in other people. Um, Circling back, Matt, to your experience, like, we've talked a lot about, your sort of aesthetic. And I think that you have like a very like specific, I mean, you both acknowledge your specific visions on design and like, a Zach Weiss design and we know a Matt Smith Johnson design. But as you sort of work with all these different watch brands who have different branding, they have different goals associated with each watch. Like, how do you balance kind of like making a Matt Smith Johnson design and sort of, you know, bringing to the table what they want you to bring to the table because they hired you for a reason, but also making something unique that doesn't, so that your watches across the industry don't just kind of look the same. Has that been a challenge for you?
It's part of design that I really kind of enjoy. Like, to me, it is the difference between like art and design. I mean, there's a lot of differences, but one of the things that is art is you can be expressive and say something and put up a painting, and whether you get it for its intended purposes or not doesn't matter. You can, it's a little more of a free kind of form of expression, whereas design is goal oriented, right? And it's like solving a puzzle a bit more. How do I communicate this thing, without using any words, like through an object? How do I communicate this? And that's one of the things that when I was working at agencies early on, I got put into doing retail and making fixtures. And I really enjoyed that because now I've got to take, a brand that has a feeling and replicate it through a series of tables and stools and things like objects that don't have taglines on them, but they still got to represent that. And you learn how to like use this abstract kind of perception of the world that we have, things that are soft and yielding versus things that are hard and angular, and what that means. And context, also important. So like a piece that I did that just came out recently that's quite different from a lot of the stuff I do is it was a Vero Meridian called the Portland dial. It's a very classic looking watch, and that brief when it came to me was, we'd already done the original Meridian, which had a bit more of a closer connection to the workhorse piece, which is that's a very like different watch. And then other things have all been connected to it. But this is a much further kind of classical departure. And, one of the things I do is say, well, they wanted a California dial. And I said, but it's been done. Can we do that in a way, like still do that? Like it's still going to be that, but not that at the same time, that it's fresh and it's something that still gives you something to say, like, I get it. We want to do one of these California dials because it's like everyone kind of does. It's almost a rite of passage to make a cool version of that. And you go, okay, so like, how do I do that? And I like that kind of dial too. So, I broke up the numbers in a slightly different way, and still using the typeface I designed, the numerals anyways. I didn't do a full typeface, but the numerals and the type treatment that I designed for them and some of the proportions for that line. But like the end result is very classical, and it's just like, I just want to make the best version of the thing you want, and if your goals are, sometimes they just happen to align very neatly with things I personally enjoy, which kind of happened with Prevail, really. And even just that assignment for me was very much like, it was a designer's dream, because the brand founder, Hassan, the thing that makes my job easier is having a really clear goal to hit. What is our communication goal? Like, what is the brief? And he had a very clear goal as to what ends he wanted to achieve. But what object to achieve it with and how to get there, he's like, that's the part I don't know. So that's the place I love to play, right? So because he had this really like, okay, like, and we went through some exercises and distilled out, like, he wants to make a military watch that raises money for, giving back to veterans. And he had a charity in mind called Heart and Armor, and it gives back, mental health and even physical health and programs like that, and for families, lots of things like that. Very positive. But, he's like, in that learning, he was like, I learned from him, like, yeah, people don't really get what it's like to be a veteran. People have a caricature understanding of what we go through and who we are. Like, we're not, and in one of our conversations, I had this in my notebook, he's like, we're not just our service record, like we're people. Like, people want to go and like skateboard, do CrossFit, play tennis, run a cafe. Like, you're not in the mud, caked in filth, with a rifle, and that's cool. Like, that's not what it is. And so to like reform the perception of what a military watch could be to meet those ends, well, then I was like, and I kind of told him, like, the best way to do that is to break all the preconceived notions of what everything could be, top to bottom, right? And be positive the whole way through. So the brand name we came up with, Prevail, it's like to continue to overcome, to pull other people together and come together, camaraderie. All of those things are part of the idea when you hear the word Prevail. And you get the logo, and that does a little bit of the lifting. And of course, it's got the double kind of chevron, with the military-esque look to it. But also, those arrows are pointing, when you look at it, they're pointing forward. Keep going, move. When you raise the watch and the logo, the A is pointing, keep going, Prevail, Prevail. And then okay, that's cool. Well, then we're looking at products, and people say, well, these products are like, they're telling, and people do whatever they want. You want to make a Dirty Dozen watch? I think they're cool. Awesome. Go ahead. But it has been done. Like, that story has been told. That has an association. If you want to be a part of that, that's cool. But then again, that wasn't our goal. We want to do something different, right? So we just rethought exactly like, well, it's got to be inclusive, right? Because it's about camaraderie and coming together and overcoming. So it's got to be, we got to take down any barriers. So the way that thing wears, it's actually very wrist friendly in terms of its lug. It's only 47.5 lug to lug, even though it is fixed and it looks kind of chunky. But we want it to be very wearable and like, unisex basically, so that anyone could wear it. And, you want it to look different. Like, it's also functional. The case is wide and it's kind of lie low. It has a lower, wider profile on it, and it creates stability on the wrist. There is a reason for that. But also in doing that, and then by, if the part of the brief was it has to look traditional, maybe that solution wouldn't, I'd have to think of a different way of achieving stability. But because part of this goal, part of this communication goal was to make people see things differently, then you go, well, we have to do it differently now, because that's how you get people to pay attention and go, oh, this isn't the same thing that I thought it would be. So that's I don't know. There's a long-winded answer. That's all I have.
No, I think
sorry if I prattle on too long, but that's the kind of like the best way I can tell it is like through that experience of like, yeah, I want to do your communication goal. And I certainly am working on some other things that are very classic, very not maybe aligned with what I personally would like. I just happen to like modernism and kind of like brutalism and, very avant-garde things. And just to fulfill that brief, it ended up aligning with me. Same with the workhorse for Vero. They said, we want to do something different. Like, forget what anything looks like. Let's do something completely new and wild. And so, again, we developed a brief together about what that thing should be, and we hit that goal, and it went over very well, right? But then, we're doing, like, again, Smoky Bear or the Portland Dial, very classic, very different. But yeah. I just strive to do the best version of whatever it is. And the thing that really, at the end of the day, the one thing that I like to do with my work that is consistent, because I can't say it's necessarily like a style thing. I mean, I know there's probably some things I do, but I try to create joy. Like, and that's one thing that I really like doing is, I know that how much watches mean to me and how much I appreciate them. And the idea of creating joy in someone else's experience of a timepiece, however I can do that, when I'm making the Smoky Bear watch, I go, oh, I can hide a shovel for the counter of the, secondhand. It's a little detail that most people probably won't even notice for a long time. And then they might go, oh, that's his shovel. And it just gives you a little smile in the mind, right? And then that's fun. Like, that's all I really want to do.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's hard because I obviously know the watches you designed, so I can't kind of get that out of my head. But like, the Prevail watch and one of the Vero watches. Like Vero wouldn't make the Prevail, and I don't think Prevail would make the Workhorse. But
No.
They're both look like kind of Master Johnson designs. So I know we're running a little long, so I just want to make sure we get a chance to talk about the ride. But there's one other design question I wanted to direct at you, Zach. You've seen so many watches. Like honestly, just being in the position of like a watch, journalist, you probably maybe even seen more watches and handled more watches than a lot of people in the industry who are also designing products, just by virtue of it being sent to you. Is that a blessing or a curse? Like, does that make it harder for you to come up with original ideas because you're sort of those designs have infiltrated you? Or do you feel like you've kind of seen it all and you can draw on the best parts and be inspired?
It's both sort of. Sometimes I'm definitely concerned when I'm working that like something I'm working on and is feeling good is because maybe it was something I liked 5-6 years ago kind of thing, or reminds me of it. It's not like, oh, I accidentally copied a watch, but like, oh, that curve, like that was something that I really liked here and there. I mean, a curve is a little abstract, but you know what I mean? Like you can end up with a pattern or a feeling. I think I've been lucky in that if they start to get close, I recognize them pretty quickly, and then I can pull back and figure out, or sometimes when I design, I just create hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of the thing, and I'll just pull it to the side. I always keep it, so I'll be like, oh yeah, I like that. I'll move on and find something else to do. The other time, in other ways, it's like, well, I know like people with bezels in particular. I've designed a lot of fun bezels, and almost none of them have gotten made because they've been a little too much or like too complicated in some way for the project. I've been like, well, nobody's done X. Everyone does the elapsed time. Everyone does a 12-hour. Everyone does, X, Y, and Z. No one wants to make something that's like kind of useless or just purely emotional or something like that. So I've definitely tried to integrate those in where it's like, it's more poetic kind of a concept but I mean, the reality is, and then I think about, how I use it. I don't ever use my bezel. And a 12-hour bezel sometimes I've used, but like I never track elapsed time. I never dive. So like if it's going to have something on it, it should just be pretty and be cool. So, actually the boulder is a good example of one that I did get through, and that's just a layout thing. So I had the hours facing upright and then the minutes like perpendicular to them, so that the line between where they meet is the actual hash mark sort of, so you can still line it up. And I was Boulder, once again, thanks Leon. He's very open-minded. But yeah, that was one that got through, but I try to remember. But it's funny, like I said, like my personal taste is actually veering more classical these days than it used to. That said, my last few watches are wildly different from each other in different ways, but the more classical you get, the more old terrain obviously there is. It's sort of what it's defining it, right? It's like there's a appeal to sort of the Platonic Breguet-esque traditional watch design that is very alluring. It has it's a beauty to it that everyone obviously likes, or a lot of people like, and it's a lot about texture and finishing and things like that. So trying to find how to do that originally I think is a real challenge. I haven't really had an opportunity to crack, but it's something I think about.
Yeah. No, this is really interesting. I feel like I'd be curious to get people's feedback when they listen to this episode, but I feel like this is like we're just kind of cracking the surface of a conversation that you guys could have about design. I found it really interesting, and maybe this is an opportunity to think about like future episodes or conversations or topics, just like a designer's approach to this subject. I think would be really interesting. But I do want to get to sort of talking about the Ride to Conquer Cancer. That
Can I quickly jump in one thing? I was going to say this, but Matt, you were talking. I didn't want to interrupt you. Your story of like grabbing the guy's headphones and listening to Master Poet is like the most iconic thing I've ever heard. Like that feels like a montage out of a movie. Like I was a normal kid until I put on, TJ's headphones and became a metal. It's like, it's perfect. I love that.
It's true though, man. I remember that moment, and I just like, I always liked music, but like I never loved music like that. And also what a great first track to listen to. Like, here's the
Oh
other
yeah,
thing.
so
I
good.
was never able to, like,
Yeah.
I've been chasing the heavy metal high for ages, and I've never been able to fully, I've had things that have come close and been really interesting experiences for listening, but like, that is such a heavy hitting album. And like so many metalheads I know, they're like, Master of Puppets is like, that's the tippy top of heavy metal mountain. Like, that's the best.
Yeah.
So that's a great first song, like lightning struck at the exact right moment and hit the right kid, I guess. So yeah.
I don't know my exact moment, but I think I know the origin, and it's from Transformers, the movie, the 1986 film, when the Decepticons storm the ship, and it's just this heavy riff by a band called NRG. I think they might have only been on that album. It's called Instruments of Destruction, and then they go on and kill a bunch of Autobots brutally, and it's like this incredible riff. I get chills when I listen to that song.
I have the soundtrack, and I loved that movie. I've seen that movie. So, see, we could talk a lot more about it. But that movie, I remember seeing a comedian talk about this. He was like, that movie was so traumatic. He's like, I grew up watching this cartoon. These robots would be shooting at each other. Boo, 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 boo. Every now and then, someone goes, oh, my arm. And then they run away, and it's over. And he's like, and then something happens in this movie. They all learn how to aim. There's that, like, I can't remember, was it Ironhide or at the very end, Megatron like shoots one point blank in the head, and he doesn't come back. That's the end of that character. That movie was like,
it's metal.
It was so metal. That movie is great. Anyways.
All right, sorry. We can get back on course now.
This is great. I mean, if anybody really wants to understand the true essence of, I guess, both of you, just listen to you talk about the Transformers movie.
That intro, I remember when I put that movie in too. It just starts with that beat. Do da do do da do da do da. Like, it's just anyone who's grown up in the 80s will know exactly what I'm talking about. And okay, I'll stop.
Yeah, that's getting clipped, Matt. Don't worry. No, that's awesome. But yeah, you guys should do a time on screen about the Transformers movie.
I think I would love to do that.
That'd be awesome. But yeah, so just real quick, I just want to dig a little bit into this ride we're doing. So so like I said, Matt and I have organized a team of folks who are going to be riding in the 2025 Ride to Conquer Cancer, which again is put on by the Princess Margaret Cancer Research Center. I believe that's the correct name. Raises a ton of money every year for cancer research. It's a cause that I think is close to both of us. I've been affected by cancer, various members of my family, Matt, but I think this sort of the genesis of all this is we were catching up at a Windup, and you had shared that this year, 2025, was going to be your 10th year doing the ride, which just kind of blew my mind. Like, I don't think I've committed to anything 10 years in a row, maybe except for Windup and my relationship. But never something quite as kind of like charitable as that. So I was super just like blown away. And I think that's incredible. And just wanted to sort of work with you to try to platform it as best we could. Do you want to just talk a little bit about your experience doing the ride before we get into like our team and the sponsors and stuff like that? Like, I had a couple of questions, but like, just, I would love to hear about like your experience doing the ride. And again, because I know we're a little short on time, like if you have any like particularly notable memories from the last 10 years.
Oh yeah. I mean, so first, I remember that conversation. I'm so happy to have you on board and to have Warren and Round behind this, because like, my ultimate goal is just to raise as much money and awareness for this charity as possible for Princess Margaret Cancer Research Hospital. Won't go into the details about people being affected, but just know that, my elevator pitch I give to everybody is, it's a thing that has affected me and people that I love, and I can't go to a lab and do anything about it. I'm useless in that setting, but I've over the years learned how to push pedals and just endure discomfort for hours at a time. So, hey, that can be worth something, may as well put that skill, or if it is even a skill, to use. And 10 years, like the first year I did it was kind of a dare. I ride, I don't know if you can see, I've got my bike is actually right behind me in this room, Razzle Dazzle. And it's a fixie and it's got brakes on it. But, I was riding fixed, and my friend's dad, who actually worked for the ride as well, he had done it from the beginning, and he saw my bike and said, "Oh, you could never do the ride on that bike. That's ridiculous. You wouldn't be able to do it." And of course, I can't turn down a challenge like that. And he knew what he was doing. He got me in, and we came together. We made a team, And I did the ride the first year, and I raised a ton of money on my first go around. Already we're off to a really good start doing it again. And yeah, like it's just such an incredible event. Like aside from the fundraising, when you do the ride, something that if you've ever participated, survivors, you can opt to have this special yellow flag that's on your bike. And that could be people that are currently suffering from cancer, going through treatment, and they're well enough to ride, or people that have conquered cancer. And some people choose not to, but the stories you hear while you're out there, because, it's about 100 kilometers change per day. And, you have time to talk to people while you're out there on the road. And there's thousands of cyclists. And, there's people that have lost their children. There are people that have lost, some of the, functionality of the body. There's people that have fought multiple times. And those are the memories that I take with me, and the people that you see speaking. And, even for me to do it, like, I still kind of feel like a wuss, because I've seen, there was a guy who, I can't remember his last name, but Bill, and, his team was called The Power of Bill. And, he had no vision. He was in his 90s, and he was doing the ride. He was doing it on a recumbent 1 year, I think, and then he was doing it on a tandem bike with someone else. But there's people in their octogenarians out there doing the ride for their umpteenth time, and it's so inspiring. And I feel like there is a real feeling of kind of community there. And this is like, I guess on a personal level for me, I spend a lot of time in the design dungeon. I don't really get out and socialize too often. I'm pretty solitary for most of the time. But this is an occasion where you get together with a group of people, and you all have a similar aim, and you're all there for a good reason. And there's something about a gathering like that is just like you're going to find out. It is just you just have to do it. I don't know. And I would say to anybody who's ever thought of doing a charitable event like that and has kind of gone, oh no, I don't know. It might be hard. Like, look, I've been rained on 50% of the time. I have been freezing cold. I have been super hot. I've been injured. I've been fallen on 1 year, and I still finished. I've through all kinds of discomfort. But once you get it going and you're in there, you're just, the motivation to do it, especially for that cause, is just like, you're part of this greater thing, right? And I think everyone wants to feel like they leave some sort of positive impact on the face of the planet. And that's my way of doing something, at least. And it's a wonderful event. They raise good money. And I'll say the last thing I really enjoy about it is at base camp at the end of day one, I have seen stories where one of the first few years I did it, there was a woman who came up, and she had lost all her hair, and she was going through treatment, and it was experimental. And she said, I don't know, it might, at the very least, it just extended my life longer than it was supposed to be. Great. When everyone claps, and it's about, their motto is to conquer cancer in our lifetime, which that still is their goal. But it's also to extend people's lives, less invasive treatments, quality of life during your treatment, and extending your life. And then anyways, years later, you kind of forget about that. And then this lady comes up, full head of hair, and it's her. She goes, hey, it worked way better than we could have thought, so you do see, you see that it's doing something. And I feel like that's something you don't often get. We give to a charity or something, and you go, oh, I hope it does something. Fingers crossed that's going to the thing. I hope it is, right? But this, you get to see it and feel it, and it is truly remarkable. So I have nothing but amazing memories from doing it, and I will do it until I physically am incapable of doing it. That's that's my goal.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm really excited to be going up there and doing it in June. I initially, when we started this, was just going to kind of be a behind the scenes assister in fundraising and organizing, and then James, other co-founder of Warner Wound, signed me up for the event, unbeknownst to me. So I'm going to be going out there. I'll have to.
I didn't realize you didn't sign yourself up. That's a twist on this.
I technically did. He more promised that I would go, and then at that point, you can't. Okay. You can't not do it. You know what I mean? That'd be really messed up if he literally signed me up. But yeah, I mean, we've got a really great team of people who are going to be going up there, and we've got the support of some really amazing organizations that I just kind of want to run through and maybe just kind of give a preview of some cool stuff we're doing with some of them. So these are the brands that have supported the cause already. Boulder, good friends of ours. Brew, John at Brew was very quick to join in. Cannondale, which is really exciting. We are going to be doing some special stuff with Cannondale, and they're also going to be providing some bikes for the ride, which is really exciting. Grand Central Watch, Islander, Mark over at Islander, Strap Habit. Strap Habit, really excited. We've been working with Nick over at Strap Habit and this is sort of preempting this, but we've designed a watch strap specifically for this team that is currently in production and that we're going to be selling, and then just 100% of the profits of that will go to the fundraising associated with the team. So we're really excited about that. So that should be coming out before the ride, in the next couple months.
Yep.
Studio Underdog, Watch Gang, and William Wood. And again, just want to thank them. I mean, they just were really eager to help. And then we have this really cool team of people who I think a lot of people listening to this podcast will know a bunch of these people. So obviously, Matt, you're the team captain. Alan Farmello, Warner alum, founder of Beyond the Dial, will be there. Adam Moore and his partner Brea Taylor Monroe will be there, and they're actually going to be Adam Moore, obviously watch photographer extraordinaire. They're going to be doing it on a tandem bike, which doing the ride in general sounds difficult. Doing it on a tandem bike sounds insane, but I'm excited to see them do that together. Myself, Brock Stevens, who I think a lot of folks are going to be familiar with, watch enthusiast, sort of watch influencer, I think is maybe one way you could put it. Ethan Anderson, one of the folks who I get to see at Windup, most years, and is one of my favorite people to kind of catch up with. I honestly didn't know he was doing it until you mentioned he was doing it, Matt, and I'm super excited to spend some time with him. Evan Perrone, again, friend of Worn and Wound, and James Helms, the other co-founder of Worn and Wound. So that's the team that's going to be going. Like I said, the ride is going to be in June of this year, and we're actively fundraising. So We've got a nice start. And I think with some of these special projects we're doing, we'll raise even more money, but we really are hoping that folks will choose to individually contribute. Each rider has their own donation page and has a minimum goal of $2,500 to raise. I sort of put a stake in the ground. I think that we should be able to do $50,000 in fundraising. That's really where I want to try to get. So if you're listening to this podcast and you feel like this is something you care about, we'll put it in the show notes. But yeah, please, if you can, donate to the ride, and let's see how much money we can raise. I think, with the power of the watch community, we can do some serious fundraising damage. So I'm hoping to do that.
It's a good opportunity to give to an organization that is really seeking to help people. And I feel like just a lot of things in the world nowadays, people aren't really looking out for just numero uno or the feet that are right underneath them, because times can be confusing and stuff and tough and all those, but it's good to see that that they're still continued in their mission and pushing for this goal, and it's again, anyone who's listening to this who also has ever done the ride or an event like it will know the powerful feelings you have during it. I'll tell you, the first time I crossed that finish line after year one, I wept. I was just oh my God, all the things that I heard along the way. And there was a story my friend's dad told me, and I got to see this woman speak at one of the rides too, which was the best story. But it's true. And he did the first year, and it was just, much smaller event then, still probably, a lot of people doing it. Now it's 5,000 people, but smaller then. And this woman who, as a child, when she was going through cancer treatment at one of the cancer treatment centers for children out here in Toronto, she lost her leg, and much higher up above the knee, and a lot of the other children that she was having treatment with didn't make it because this is back in the 80s. This just wasn't. Technology wasn't where it is today. And when she heard that we're doing this ride, she didn't have a bike. She went down to the marina in Toronto and rented like this tricycle, this like heavy steel, like just for touring around, when you return it, and apparently rented one of these and did the ride on that. And she tied her one foot to the pedal with a bandana. And it was just like, when I saw her speak, she was like, every pump at the pedal, I was just like, one more. And, the other part of the story that my friend's dad told me when he first got me up to this, he was saying, Richard was his name. He was like, they were doing like a bit of a count at the end, and they're going, there's still a person out on the course, and they're trying to open the roads again and get traffic as normal. And so they said they have a thing they call a sweeper. If you get stuck, a truck will come and say, okay, put your bike in the truck. We got to move it along. And they came and said, hey, we're going to take your bike. And she said, no, like, I'm doing this. And so they went, all right. And they called back to base, and they're like, she's refusing to get off the bike. I guess we just let her. And then they said, no. So like she ended up coming into the finish line super late, but with like an escort from two, I think like mopeds or motorcyclists came and made sure she was safe. But it's things like that where you're like, like you will experience these things and hear these things, and you're just like, who doesn't want to be a part of something good, So
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, I'm super excited. I'm happy that we had that conversation. It's led to this, and I'm excited to, have those experiences you shared, because I think it's hopefully going to make, maybe this is my first of many future rides. That would be great. So yeah, like I was saying, if you listen this far and you want to contribute to the cause, again, it'll be in the show notes, but, any contributions you guys can make would be great. Like I said, each rider has a $2,500 fundraising minimum, but we're really shooting for that $50,000 goal. So I think we could totally do it. I think it's well within reach. So anything you contribute would be great. And I think that'll do it for this episode. Thanks, Matt, for joining us and for everything you do and for spearheading this ride. And thanks everybody for listening. We'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you for having me.